The piercing wails of two infant girls echoed through the cramped apartment as Sarah hurled their belongings onto the bed with vicious force. Her face was a mask of cold fury, each movement sharp and deliberate as she stuffed clothes into a worn suitcase. The baby's cries seemed to fuel her anger rather than soften it. "Sarah, please," David whispered, his voice breaking as he watched his world crumble. "The babies need you. They're crying for their mother." Sarah's laugh was bitter, cutting through the air like broken glass. "Their mother?" She spun around, her eyes blazing with resentment. "I never signed up to be a mother to these burdens. I married you for a better life, not this pathetic existence." David's heart shattered as he looked at his 3-month-old daughters, Emma and Sophia, their tiny faces red from crying. Their mother hadn't even glanced at them once during her tirade. "Don't do this," David pleaded, dropping to his knees. "If you won't stay for me, stay for them. They're innocent in all this. They didn't ask to be born." Sarah zipped her suitcase, with a finality that seemed to seal their fate. "I don't care what happens to them," she spat, her words like poison. "Honestly, David, I couldn't care less if they lived or died. You lost your job, and now you're all dead weight to me." The door slammed with such force that the thin walls shuddered, leaving behind in silence broken only by the soft whimpers of 2 abandoned babies and the muffled sobs of a broken man. David sank to the floor beside the bed where his daughters lay, their tiny fists waving helplessly in the air. Everything had been different just months ago. Sarah had been different, or perhaps he had been blind to who she really was. When he lost his position at the accounting firm, her true nature had emerged like a poison seeping through cracks. "Shh, my angels," David whispered, gathering both babies in his arms. They were so small, so fragile, and now they had only him. "I may not have money to give you everything you deserve, but I swear on my life, I'll be the father you need. I'll be everything to you." He rocked them gently, humming a lullaby his own mother had sung to him years ago. Gradually their cries subsided, and they drifted into peaceful sleep, trusting completely in the arms that held them. Dawn broke gray and unforgiving, bringing with it the harsh reality of David's situation. 2 hungry babies, no job, no money, and bills mounting like storm clouds on the horizon. But self-pity was a luxury he couldn't afford. His daughters depended on him. David strapped the twins to his chest in makeshift carriers fashioned from torn bedsheets and old clothes. He had managed to rent a small pushcart, and with Emma and Sophia secured against him, he made his way to the bustling marketplace. The work was backbreaking, hauling heavy sacks of rice, pushing loaded carts through crowded streets, his back aching with every step. But what cut deeper than the physical pain were the stares. Some people looked at him with pity, others with curiosity, and a few with outright judgment. "Look at him," one woman hissed to her companion, loud enough for David to hear. "Playing house with those babies while probably abandoning all responsibility. Men these days have no shame." David's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Let them think what they wanted. His daughter's well-being was all that mattered. Not everyone was cruel, though. An elderly woman with kind eyes stopped him as he rested in the shade, the twins sleeping peacefully against his chest. "Young man," she said, softly, pressing a crumpled bill into his palm, "you're doing something beautiful here. Those little ones are lucky to have a father who loves them so much." David's eyes misted over. "Thank you," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. Days blended into weeks, and weeks into months. David's routine never varied. Rise before dawn, strap the babies to his chest, work until his body screamed for rest, then return home to feed and care for his daughters. His hands grew calloused, his back permanently bent from the heavy loads, but his love for Emma and Sophia only grew stronger. One particularly sweltering morning, an elderly neighbor named Grace approached him as he prepared for another day of labor. "David," she said, Her weathered face creased with concern. "Let me watch the girls today. This heat isn't good for babies, and you look exhausted." David hesitated. Since Sarah's abandonment, he had barely let the twins out of his sight. They were his world, his reason for breathing. "I understand your fear," Grace continued gently. "But I have grandchildren of my own. I know how to care for little ones, and they'll be safer in my cool house than out there in this sun." Reluctantly, David agreed. All day his heart remained with his daughters, but when he returned that evening, he found them giggling happily. In Grace's arms, their faces glowing with health and contentment. "They're precious," Grace said, carefully transferring them back to their father. "I'd be happy to help whenever you need it." From that day forward, Grace became the grandmother his daughters never had. She watched them while David worked, taught them their first words, and loved them as if they were her own blood. The years passed in a blur of hard work and small victories. Emma and Sophia grew into bright, beautiful young women, their academic achievements filling David with pride, even as his body grew weaker from years of manual labor. Despite their modest circumstances, both girls excelled in school, their intelligence shining like beacons of hope. When the university entrance exam results arrived, David's hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Emma had scored 341, Sophia 325. Both had gained admission to study medicine. "Daddy!" Emma shrieked, launching herself into his arms. "We did it! We're going to be doctors!" David spun them around in the small living room, tears streaming down his face. "My brilliant daughters," he laughed. "I'll walk through town with my chest puffed out, telling everyone that my girls are going to be doctors." But later, alone in his room, David's smile faded. The university fees were astronomical, far beyond anything his pushcart earnings could ever cover. The weight of his failure pressed down on him like a crushing stone. "All these years of sacrifice," he whispered to himself, "and now, when they need me most, I have nothing to give them." That night, David knelt beside his bed and poured his heart out to God. "Please," he sobbed, his shoulders shaking with the force of his despair. "I've given everything I have. If you can't help me send them to university, at least show me another way. They deserve so much more than I can give them." Unbeknownst to him, Emma and Sophia heard every word through the thin walls. They had never seen their strong, resilient father break down, and it shattered their hearts. "We can't let him suffer like this," Sophia whispered to her sister. "What choice do we have?" Emma replied, tears in her own eyes. The next morning, the twins made a decision that would change their lives forever. They went to the university and deferred their admissions, then set out to find work. After days of searching, they found jobs at a small but respectable restaurant. The owner, impressed by their determination and genuine warmth, hired them immediately. Emma and Sophia threw themselves into their work with the same dedication they had shown in their studies. They arrived early, stayed late, and treated every customer like family. Their infectious smiles and genuine care soon made them favorites among the regular patrons. "These girls have something special," customers would say. "They make you feel like you're dining in your own home." Month after month, the twins saved every penny they could, living on the bare minimum and dreaming of the day they could either return to university or help their father retire from his backbreaking work. 7. Months into their employment, they had saved enough to open their own small restaurant. It wasn't much, just a few tables and basic equipment, but it was clean, welcoming, and filled with love. Word spread quickly about the twins' restaurant. Their food was delicious, their service warm and genuine, and their story of sacrifice for their father touched the hearts of everyone who heard it. Soon, customers were lining up outside their door. One evening, as Emma was cleaning tables after a particularly busy day, she noticed a black leather briefcase tucked under one of the chairs. "Sophia, look at this," she called, holding up the case. Inside, they found stacks of important-looking documents and what appeared to be a significant amount of foreign currency. "Someone's going to be frantic looking for this," Sophia said immediately. The next morning, they arrived at the restaurant early, the briefcase safely in their possession. As they unlocked the door, they saw a well-dressed man pacing anxiously beside an expensive black sedan. "Excuse me," he called out desperately. "You didn't happen to find a black briefcase, did you?" Emma smiled and retrieved the case from their bag. "This one?" The man's relief was palpable. "Thank you," he breathed, quickly inspecting the contents. "Thank you so much." He hurried to his car and drove away without another word. "Well," Sophia laughed, "so much for a reward." But their honesty hadn't gone unnoticed. The next day, the same man returned, this time with a smile and a purpose. "I'm Marcus Williams," he introduced himself, stepping out of his car. "Yesterday, you saved my family's future by returning that briefcase. The documents inside were irreplaceable. They would have cost us everything." Emma and Sophia exchanged curious glances. "I want to show you something," Marcus continued, gesturing for them to follow him. He led them to a large, impressive building just a few blocks away. "This is yours now," he said simply. "The documents you returned were the deeds to my family's properties. Without them, we would have lost everything, including this building. It's the least I can do." The twins stood in stunned silence, looking up at what would become their new restaurant location. "But we can't accept this," Emma stammered. Marcus shook his head firmly. "Honesty like yours is rare in this world. You could have kept that money and those documents, but you didn't. This building will serve your family far better than it serves mine sitting empty." That evening, Emma and Sophia raced to find their father at the market, where he was finishing another grueling day with his pushcart. "Daddy!" Sophia called, throwing her arms around his weathered frame. People in the market stared in amazement at the sight of these two beautiful, successful-looking young women embracing the humble cart pusher. "Come with us," Emma said, taking his hand. "We have something to show you." When they reached the building, David stood motionless, unable to comprehend what his daughters were telling him. "It's ours, Daddy," Sophia said, her voice trembling with excitement. "We're opening our new restaurant here." David's knees nearly buckled as the reality sank in. His daughters, his precious girls, had not only succeeded, but flourished beyond his wildest dreams. That night, as they sat together, planning their future, Emma took her father's weathered hands in hers. "Daddy, you're retiring the pushcart," she said firmly. "You've sacrificed enough for us. Now it's our turn to take care of you." David started to protest, but Sophia cut him off. "We won't hear any arguments. You raised us to be strong, and now we're strong enough to provide for all of us." The new restaurant was everything they had dreamed of, and more. Marcus had not only given them the building, but had it fully furnished with elegant tables, modern kitchen equipment, and everything they needed to create a first-class dining experience. Emma and Sophia's reputation for excellent food and genuine hospitality grew by the day. Soon they were not just successful, they were thriving beyond their wildest dreams. True to their word, they ensured their father never worked another day of manual labor. David, who had spent years breaking his back for others, now spent his days reading in the garden behind the restaurant, playing chess with other retired men, and watching his daughters build an empire. But success didn't make Emma and Sophia forget those who had helped them along the way. Grace, the kind neighbor who had cared for them as babies and children, was now elderly and struggling with medical bills. "She was like a mother to us when we had no one," Emma said to her sister one evening. Without hesitation, they renovated Grace's small house, making it comfortable and accessible for her aging body. Every month, they made sure her medical bills were paid and that she never wanted for anything. "You girls have hearts of gold," Grace would say, tears in her eyes. "Your father raised you right." The restaurant's success continued to grow exponentially. Within 2 years, Emma and Sophia had opened 5 locations across the state, and within 5 years, their restaurant chain had expanded nationwide. They Lion never forgot their humble beginnings or the father who had sacrificed everything for them. David lived like a king in his old age, wanting for nothing, surrounded by the love of daughters who had never forgotten the man who chose them over everything else. One afternoon, as David sat in the garden behind the original restaurant, reading a newspaper and sipping tea, he watched Emma and Sophia directing their staff with the same care and attention they had always shown. A woman approached the restaurant's entrance, her clothes worn and her face drawn with desperation. She spoke to one of the hostesses, pleading for any kind of work. "I can clean, cook, wash dishes, anything," she begged. "I just need a chance." Emma and Sophia, overhearing the conversation, felt their hearts stir with compassion. There was something familiar about the woman, though neither could place what it was. "We don't really need another dishwasher," Sophia murmured to her sister. "But she seems desperate," Emma replied. "Remember when we were looking for work?" They decided to give the woman a chance, assigning her to wash dishes in the kitchen. The next day, when David came for his usual visit, he wandered into the kitchen to greet the staff, as was his custom. When he saw the new dishwasher, his blood ran cold. It was Sarah. She hadn't noticed him, focused intently on her work. But David recognized her immediately, despite the years that had aged her face and dimmed the beauty that had once captivated him. He quietly retreated and found his daughters in the front of the restaurant. "Girls," he said carefully, "your new dishwasher. Do you know anything about her?" "Not much," Emma replied. "She seemed desperate for work, so we hired her." "Why?" David took a deep breath. "That woman is Sarah, your mother." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Emma's face drained of color while Sophia gripped the counter for support. "Our mother," Sophia whispered. "Yes. After she left us, I destroyed every photograph of her. The pain was too great, and I didn't want you growing up with her image, haunting our home. That's why you don't recognize her." Together, they walked back to the kitchen. When Sarah looked up and saw David standing there with two beautiful women, recognition dawned in her eyes like a cold sunrise. I'm so sorry," she stammered, her voice barely audible. "I'm so very sorry." Emma's face hardened, years of abandonment crystallizing into pure anger. "Get out," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Get out now." She grabbed a handful of cash from the register and thrust it at Sarah. "This is more than you've earned. Take it and leave. I don't know you, and you are not my mother. Grace is my mother, the woman who held me when I was sick, who taught me to walk, who was there for every moment you weren't." Sophia placed a gentle hand on her sister's shoulder. "Emma, I understand your anger. I feel it too. But look at her, she's broken, desperate. Maybe what?" Emma snapped. "Maybe we should forget that she abandoned us as babies? That she told Daddy she didn't care if we lived or died?" Sarah fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Please," she sobbed. "I was young, selfish, and stupid. I threw away the most precious thing in the world, my family. I've lived with that regret every day since." The kitchen fell silent, except for the sound of Sarah's quiet weeping. That evening, David sat with his daughters in the garden, the weight of the day's revelation heavy on all their shoulders. "What do you want to do?" he asked gently. Emma was quiet for a long time before speaking. "I want to forgive her," she finally said, "not for her sake but for ours. Carrying this anger is like drinking poison and expecting her to die from it." Sophia nodded in agreement. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean trusting her immediately." They decided to give Sarah another chance, but not as a dishwasher. They promoted her to assistant manager, hoping that responsibility would help her prove herself worthy of their tentative trust. For several weeks, Sarah seemed to embrace her second chance. She was punctual, respectful, and appeared genuinely grateful for the opportunity. The staff liked her, and customers responded well to her friendly demeanor. But gradually, cracks began to show in Sarah's reformed facade. She started speaking harshly to the kitchen staff, criticizing their work and demanding perfection in a way that felt more like bullying than leadership. "You're too slow," she would snap at the cooks. "This presentation is sloppy. Do you want to embarrass this restaurant?" The warm, family-like atmosphere that had always characterized Emma and Sophia's restaurants began to chill. Staff members started dreading their shifts, and customer complaints began trickling in about the increasingly tense atmosphere. Sales started to decline as word spread that the once welcoming restaurant had become uncomfortable and unwelcoming. Emma and Sophia called Sarah into their office for a frank discussion. "Your behavior is driving away our staff and customers," Emma said directly. "This isn't how we run our business." Sarah's face flushed with anger. "I'm your mother," she snapped. "I brought you into this world, and I won't be lectured by my own daughters about how to do my job." "You're here because we chose to give you a chance," Sophia replied firmly. "But if you continue to damage what we've built, that chance will disappear." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Where's that precious father of yours? The one you shower with money and gifts while he sits at home doing nothing? At least I'm working for what you give me." Emma's face darkened with fury. "Don't you ever speak about our father that way again. He sacrificed everything for us while you ran away to chase your own selfish dreams." The confrontation escalated until Sarah stormed out, screaming that her own daughters didn't love her, and that David had poisoned their minds against her. That evening, Emma and Sophia sat with their father, emotionally exhausted from the encounter. "She hasn't changed," David said sadly. "I had hoped, but some people are too broken to heal." "What should we do?" Sophia asked. David sighed deeply. "She's still your mother, and I'll always love the woman I married and the mother of my children. But I won't let her destroy what you've built. You have to make a choice: protect your business and your future, or enable her destructive behavior." The decision, though painful, was clear. The next morning, Emma and Sophia informed Sarah that her employment was terminated. Sarah's response was explosive. "This is all his fault," she screamed, pointing toward the restaurant where she knew David was having breakfast. "He turned you against me. He poisoned you with his lies." But even as they watched their mother storm away, Emma and Sophia didn't abandon her completely. They rented a small shop space near Sarah's apartment and stocked it with inventory, giving her the chance to run her own business. "We can't enable her destructive behavior," Emma explained to David. "But we won't let her starve either." With Sarah's toxic influence removed, the restaurants flourished once again. The warm, welcoming atmosphere returned. Staff members smiled again, and customers flocked back in droves. Emma and Sophia expanded their business empire, opening locations across the country and eventually internationally. Their success story became legendary. The twin daughters who had risen from poverty to build a billion-dollar restaurant empire through hard work, honesty, and love. But perhaps their greatest success was the father they had saved from a life of back-breaking labor. The man who now spent his golden years surrounded by the love and luxury he had never dreamed possible. As David sat in the garden of the original restaurant, now just one of hundreds bearing the Emma and Sophia name, he reflected on the long journey that had brought them here. The pain of Sarah's abandonment had been transformed into the fuel that powered his daughter's success. Sometimes, he murmured to himself, watching Emma and Sophia direct their empire with the same care they had once. Shown for their struggling little family, the greatest tragedies become the foundation for the greatest triumphs. And in the distance, he could see Grace approaching with her weekly basket of homemade cookies. Still the grandmother his daughters claimed with pride. Still the woman who had helped raise 2 abandoned babies into the most successful businesswomen in the country. Some families are born, David thought with a smile. Others are chosen, and the chosen ones, built on love rather than blood, often prove the strongest of all.